Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Mr. Bird has already said that we have a quorum. This is a meeting of the Trace Evidence Subcommittee of the Virginia Scientific Advisory Committee. I asked to have a meeting of the subcommittee because I just felt we should discuss the current state of trace evidence in Virginia. And I wanted to make sure everybody had laid some eyes on the procedures. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to review those. The Trace Evidence Subcommittee consists of myself, Aaron Forey, Randall Beatty, and Ken Zersey. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda for the meeting. The members should have received a copy of the draft agenda from Ms. Strobel. Can I have a motion to adopt the draft agenda?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Since there's only 3 of us and I've all heard ayes. So that motion passes. So the agenda has been adopted. The next part of the agenda is the chair's report. I do not have a report. So we're going to move right into the discussion of the gasoline sufficiency method validation. You should have already received a copy of that in the email with the agenda. And I just have a few comments myself, and then I'd like to just get any feedback from the subcommittee members. I know Brenda Christie and Kelsey Winters are on the call, who are 2 of the authors of the method. This is, in my mind, is groundbreaking research that is wonderful because it's practical, and it's been presented at workshops and at regional and national meetings. So they've definitely gotten the word out how to apply this methodology, and it's been published in Journal of Forensic Chemistry and is now being included in the Virginia procedures. They've done some validation to make sure this works for different analysts in different laboratories, which I think is great. I guess you could tell I'm a fan of this research. So any feedback from other members of the Trace Evidence Subcommittee on this method?
I'm not a trace evidence person, but looking over the totality of all of this, can you tell me more about how, just for my own knowledge, how impactful this is to the community?
Well, and I'll answer just from my perspective, and if Brenda or Kelsey want to jump in. But typically when fire debris is being interpreted, any analysis of the both the total ion chromatograms and extracted ion chromatograms are being interpreted, it's always been somewhat subjective. And this method is really trying to get an objective measure of these chromatograms to say this is definitely gasoline, or this is maybe borderline, whether it should be called or not, or this one is something you shouldn't call. And we've never really had anything like that before. So there has been some variation in interpretation from analyst to analyst. I think that that's something that they're trying to get away from. Did I outline that okay, Brenda? Or
yes,
Kelsey?
your overview is very good. So you're correct in that historically
fire debris, like any pattern comparison analysis, has some subjectivity to it. So fire debris has a lot of differences in how people interpret the data and how they apply that data. And the previous iterations of the ASTM standards were not super helpful in how to do that. So in OSAC, we are trying to augment those, and they've been gone through several new iterations, but they're not published yet. So what this particular procedure is trying to do is to, much like in the latent print sufficiency, display how good the data is. So the totality of the data to make a decision is going to be displayed, so that if I were going to go to court and there was a defense expert and we had different opinions based on the same data, it would give the trier of fact a method to see, well, why do they have differences of opinion? Was the data not clear, or was it clear? But something objective to hang your hat on, as opposed to entirely subjective interpretation of that data. So it will objectively show you how much data is present in order to support the conclusion that gasoline is present.
Can I just add for just a second? It also clarified the criteria that was necessary to call it gasoline, the compounds present within. There was some previous publications that weren't always in agreement with regards to what needed to be present, the compounds that needed to be present to identify gasoline. And this made it clear based on data what compounds need to be present in order to call something gasoline.
And
Yes,
I'm sorry. I was also going to say to Aaron, also the way the ASTM standard is laid out, gasoline is its own class. So there are other classes of ignitable liquids that are more general classes. So there, many different products would fit within a certain class in the ASTM standard, whereas gasoline is its own class. So that is also, I think, one of the reasons you started probably with this, Brenda, but also I'm not sure, you're probably going to continue into some other classes with some further studies.
We're analyzing some medium classes currently. Gasoline is the most prevalent, but gasoline being the most prevalent, also historically, not here, but people have made conclusions that have been in court and have been rebutted by other witnesses. I'm not aware of that happening in Virginia, but in other places I am aware that people have come to different conclusions based on the same data. So like Robin mentioned, looking at the products to identify gasoline, ASTM typically has only listed 5 compounds that needed to be present. Well, those 5 compounds are also made by matrix whenever you burn anything related to plastics or carpet. So that's why we were having a large number of conclusions that could be called into question by people if they weren't looking at that correctly. So what the research did, which wasn't its original intent, but worked out very well, is to elucidate in comparing the compounds that come from gasoline and what those ratios are to those same compounds from matrix materials, so that we could say which of the compounds that were present in gasoline are more indicative of gasoline and less indicative of matrix materials. So that when we were trying to put weight on any one ratio or one compound, the frequency at which you see those compounds in matrix were also considered.
Any other comments in this discussion? Aaron, you feeling good about it?
Yeah. I just started even thinking, can this be applied retroactively to previous data, from older cases as well, where something might have been kind of questionable, like you talked about with the experts having differences of opinions?
So in order to do it easily, we need data that is done on a GCMS. So any data that was done on a GCFID doesn't have all of the necessary compounds that we can identify what they were and then put them in. So maybe if we could try it with a ruler, but that hasn't been validated. So we would need GCMS data. We have altered this for other laboratories to use. So it was originally made using Agilent technology, and we developed ways to transfer the data from Agilent into our Sufficiency Excel workbook. I also give that to everybody at workshops, so they all own the Excel workbooks after they leave. So they don't have to buy anything in order to do it. So, but we have made it available for people using Shimatsu and Varian, I believe, GCMS systems. Some people have altered the workbook so that they can use it with those systems as well as Agilent. So it's completely customizable in those respects.
And Aaron, actually, I mean, I just had a case where I was reviewing some other people's work, and this was this was the issue at hand. I don't use Agilent stuff. I use Althermo stuff. And I tried the measuring things with a ruler and also just trying to, you know, unless you have the software that the samples have been run on and the actual raw data, it would be difficult to do. At least that's what I found. But if you have the raw data and you have the software, anybody should be able to do this, given the protocols that are laid out, and especially in the spreadsheets. Is that right?
Yes. Do you have the spreadsheet?
Right? Do I? Yes. Anybody else want to weigh in? So there's no real vote. I just wanted, I think you guys wanted this discussed, and I think we've discussed it. I don't think there's any reason for us to bless it, other than it. I mean, I don't see any issues with it. I think it's really great research. Unless you guys want us to bless it, I'm happy to bless it.
Yeah. So generally, what happens is that when we open a review for some method validation, you just recommend to close the review and vote on that. And if you had any recommendations or anything like that, it could either be in the form of you saying, "Hey, we have these recommendations, but we're going to close the review," or if it's something that is, something that you think we need to not only hear those recommendations, but you want to hear that we have responded in some way, then you can not close it until we report back. It doesn't sound like those are going to be your options that you choose today for this particular thing, but just historically for the other types of subcommittees, that's how these validation reviews have gone. And then you'll report to the scientific advisory committee on, the fact that you did the review and that kind of stuff.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to entertain a motion to close the review. I think it's, I don't know if Randall has any issues with this.
No, I have no issues. For that matter, I'll move to close the review.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Nobody opposed. It's really easy when there's three. So we'll just say that review is closed. Good job to the Virginia people that took this on.
I have just a question, like sort of application. So there's obviously a lot of talk about sharing validation data so that other labs can validate things or verify them. I know there's a publication and you have the workshops because I think you might have had one at the last AFS meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Was there like a big workshop on this? I vaguely remember.
The last AFS meeting was a workshop on ASTM standards. So
okay.
There were a few slides related to this because it's an easy method. We were trying with the ASTM standard workshop more to show how the previous standards and the new standards could be interpreted differently, but I used the results from my sufficiency graphs to show how difficult the samples were. And I included it as a example of documentation that could be done in that workshop. But it was taught at AAFS 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the
Two.
entire workshop 2
Yeah.
years ago. It was right after COVID, so we didn't have very many attendees at the American Academy, but we have also taught it at the Mid-Atlantic Association of Forensic Scientists, the Midwestern Association of Forensic Scientists, and the Northwestern. So we haven't hit the Northeast or the South yet.
Okay. Because Virginia DFS has pioneered a lot of things in forensics. You guys were some of the first to share your SOPs that, you know, and have really done a lot to lead in the field. So I was just wondering, like, how, if you're considering sharing what level of detail of the data, you know, in a repository or in a publication, things of that nature, if you've done that or if you're considering it.
Nobody's asked for more information yet. None of it's trying to be held secret in any sort of way. So we do have the publications that are out there. We have some other publications that I was hoping to have published, but one of the other authors was going to take the lead and what the differences are in gasoline that we have shown through this research versus what has been published in the past, which has basically been not validated and what just people have seen in gasoline. So we were trying to publish that. So that should help with this. There's another workshop I'm going to teach in September at the Midwestern Association of Forensic Scientists that's going to be data interpretation. So I'll throw some of this in there as well, just to keep it on the forefront of people's minds for adaptation. So I've had a few people attempt to do some adaptation, but it hasn't, I just think change is hard. So people aren't going to jump into it right away.
Mm-hmm.
So Elise, I know that with one of the more recent toxicology grants, we were part of the, you know, because this was done under an NIJ grant, this research. And so I know the toxicology grant, we were having to figure out how to put raw data in a repository so that people could access it. Was that something that was required in the grant for fire debris?
Well, typically in most NIJ grants, that is a requirement, but I believe this particular grant, can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
did not have that requirement.
No, the new one does that we're working on now. We do have to put that data in a repository. This older one did
Yeah.
not have that requirement, but I don't have any problem putting it in a repository. It just wasn't done as part of the grant.
Right.
Right.
Thanks.
Right. And one other thing that we could do is also include this, since it's already published work, you know, we could include this in the ASCLD validation repository, you know, that doesn't have all of the underlying data, but is another place where somebody could look and say, oh, I'm interested in that, and this is who you should contact. So we have not done that in the past, but we could do that with this.
Thanks. I think it's great.
So Aaron mentioned the trace evidence procedures manual being published online, and Virginia being one of the first, and that's always been a positive thing in my mind. And so as part of the preparation for this meeting, the subcommittee members were sort of tasked at least to do a read through and review of the trace evidence procedures, which are quite lengthy, because we cover so many different things in trace evidence. So in the end, I think the procedures are great. I wish I could be more critical. I like being critical, but there's you know, everything's well written, thorough. It's always kind of tricky with trace evidence procedures because you want to be prescriptive enough that people are all on the same page and doing things in a somewhat standardized way, but you can't be too prescriptive because we deal with all sorts of different things. So, and different matrices and different substrates, and so you have to have some latitude. I think these procedures strike a really good balance of that. I would like to get any feedback from Aaron and Randall on the procedures. Anything that struck your eye that you had any concerns about?
No concerns. I'm actually remarkably familiar with this manual because I've borrowed from it many a time in history past as a quality manager, in the structure and the level of detail. So I am very complimentary of it.
Randall, any
As
comment?
with Aaron,
I'm sorry, I was
That's-
talking over you.
yeah, no problem. I'm not a trace guy, but I'm proud to admit at this stage in my career, I learned a tremendous amount about trace evidence and the procedures that they use by simply browsing through the manual. Very impressive.
Well, great. That makes things kind of easy. So I guess this was not something that we're asked by the DFS to review. I don't know if we need to close any review of the procedures manual since it's a living document that will be changing, I'm sure, over time, as all of our procedure manuals do. So I don't really want to close any review of it, but I'm glad that we all got our eyes on it, and all of us, none of us have a problem. So Robin, everybody else there, great job. Whoever had a hand in that. So the next item in the agenda is public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this? And I'll leave this to Elise because I'm not really very familiar with Teams. So.
I don't believe any members of the public are here. I don't know if any staff have any comments. It seems like there are no public comments.
All right, so that being said, we can go to the next item on the agenda, which is adjourning the meeting. Is there any other issues before we adjourn that anybody would like to discuss?
This isn't an issue, but thank you for taking the time to review both the validation and the SOPs. You are not wrong that these SOPs are lengthy and take a minute to get through. So we certainly appreciate your efforts.
Well, like Aaron said, I mean, I know I've also borrowed a few phrases here and there from the manual over the years. So it's always been well done, and it's great that everything's so open. So that concludes the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second? I'll be the second this time. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All right. So all of us being in favor, that motion passes and the meeting is now adjourned. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for doing that review. I didn't want to be the only one that had eyes on it, even though I know I'm sort of the trace guy on the SAC. So I appreciate Randall and Aaron's time, and Robin and Brenda and whoever else is on the call.
Thank you all for your time and your
Thank you very
comments.
much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
sir.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.